My friends, today we gather not as citizens of one land, but as voices of a united humanity, a humanity that seeks peace, justice, and the right to live free from the shadow of terror. History has taught us that silence in the face of violence is complicity, and indifference to injustice is injustice itself. India, in her resilience and courage, stands at a crossroads. Operation Sindoor is not merely a military effort, it is a cry for dignity, a stand against the tyranny of fear, and a reminder that the world must no longer allow terrorism to be cloaked in the veil of politics. Let it be clear this is not a war against a people or a nation, but against the forces that feed on hatred, division, and destruction. The world must rise with one voice. Terror has no place among us, not in India, not in Pakistan, not in any corner of the earth. Let this be the moment we choose unity over conflict, truth over propaganda, and humanity over hate. For only then shall we honor the memory of every life lost not with revenge, but with justice and unwavering peace. Terrorism is not the reflection of any nation's soul, it is the betrayal of humanity itself. No country, no faith, no culture can claim ownership over acts of violence and destruction, for terrorism has no homeland, no religion, and no legitimacy. It is a perversion of ideology used as a tool to divide, to instill fear, and to manipulate the innocent. When we look at the pain caused by terrorism, we see not just broken buildings or shattered cities, but broken families, lost futures, and silenced dreams. These are the true costs of terror, not statistics, but human lives extinguished by hatred. To label an entire nation or people based on the actions of extremists is to fall into the same trap that terrorists themselves set, the trap of division and blind blame. It is essential, therefore, that we distinguish between a government's policies, extremist factions, and the everyday people who simply wish to live in peace. The children, the mothers, the workers, the students, they do not choose war. They do not choose violence. They, like us, suffer most when terror strikes, and thus to respond to terrorism with blanket hatred is to become what we claim to oppose. Our fight must never be against a nationality. It must be against the disease of terror, wherever it hides and whoever shelters it. When a terror attack happens in Mumbai or Delhi or Pulwama, the loss is not only India's. It is a wound upon the global conscience. It is an assault on the universal values of life, dignity, and freedom. To defeat terror, we must rise as one beyond borders, beyond religions, and assert that such violence is unacceptable, no matter the justification. India's resilience in the face of terrorism must be respected, not questioned. Her right to protect her people must be acknowledged, not politicized. The time has come for the world to abandon double standards, to stop tolerating terror when it suits their interests, and to stand consistently and firmly with the victims, not the perpetrators. Every act of terror, no matter where it takes place, must be condemned with the same voice, the same strength, and the same resolve, because when we stay silent on one act, we empower the next. We are not here to wage war, but to declare peace through strength. We do not seek to conquer, but to protect, and in this fight, every human being who values peace, security, and justice is on the same side. Terrorism may try to wear the mask of nationalism, but it is nothing more than violence clothed in lies. The world must remember, terrorism is not a nation's identity, it is humanity's enemy, and we must all rise to defeat it. Operation Sindoor stands not just as a military response, but as a symbol of India's unwavering right to protect its sovereignty and ensure peace for its people. No nation should ever be expected to tolerate continuous threats, cross-border terrorism, or calculated attacks on its soil. Just as every individual has the right to self-defense, so too does a nation have the right to defend its borders, its citizens, and its democratic values. Operation Sindoor is a reflection of that sacred right, an assertion that India will not remain silent when its peace is threatened and its people are targeted. For decades, India has shown immense patience and restraint in the face of repeated provocations. It has consistently sought dialogue over destruction, diplomacy over aggression, but peace cannot survive if only one side honors it. When terror groups operate freely, with support or neglect from across the border, India's patience cannot be mistaken for weakness. Operation Sindoor is not a declaration of war. It is a declaration that India will no longer allow terrorism to thrive under the excuse of politics, nor let its citizens live under the shadow of fear. This operation is a message not only to the perpetrators of terror but to the world, that India values peace, but not at the cost of national dignity and security. It is a reminder that sovereignty is not just about territorial lines on a map. It is about the right to live safely within those lines. When terrorists exploit safe havens and launch attacks on Indian soil, they violate not only India's borders, but its very right to exist in peace. Operation Sindoor is India's assertion that such violations will be met with strength and resolve, not silence and submission. The world has begun to understand that selective condemnation of terrorism only fuels its spread. When nations begin to support India in its right to act decisively, they are not encouraging violence, they are supporting justice. They are recognizing that a stable India means a more stable region and a safer world. Operation Sindoor, therefore, is not just India's battle. It is a global statement that nations can and must act when terror strikes, and that no country should be expected to endure what India has endured without responding. This operation is guided by precision, by purpose, and by principle. It is not aimed at civilians, nor does it seek to harm innocent people. It targets only those who plan and execute terror and those who enable them. This distinction is what makes Operation Sindoor not just a military effort, but a moral one. India has always been a responsible power, one that values restraint, law, and human dignity, but when the time comes to act, it does so with clarity and courage. Operation Sindoor, then, is not just about defending territory, it is about defending the fundamental right of a nation to protect its people, to uphold peace through strength, and to send a message that terror will never be allowed to define our future. The global response to terrorism must no longer be divided by politics, alliances, or convenience. When innocent lives are taken, when nations are shaken by bombs and bullets, the world cannot afford to remain silent or neutral. Terrorism thrives in the shadows of indifference. It grows stronger when nations hesitate to name it, to fight it, or to stand united against it. The world must understand that this is not India's fight alone. It is a struggle that challenges the moral core of every nation that believes in peace, freedom, and justice. For too long, countries have picked and chosen which terror attacks to condemn and which to ignore. This selectivity has allowed extremist networks to survive and evolve, using safe havens, misinformation, and political cover to carry out their agendas. But terror has no borders. It may strike today in India, tomorrow in Europe, and the next day in the Middle East. The pain it causes, the fear it spreads, and the lives it steals are the same everywhere. There is no such thing as good, terrorism, or acceptable. Violence, all forms of terror, must be condemned with the same urgency and the same moral clarity. When the world unites against terror, it does more than fight a common enemy. It sends a message to those who harbor and support terrorism that their days of impunity are over. Unity removes the space in which these groups operate. It ends the ambiguity, it forces accountability, and most importantly, it honors the memory of the victims, not just with words of mourning, but with actions that prevent future attacks. This unity must be more than symbolic. It must be rooted in cooperation, intelligence sharing, and unwavering political will. Operation Sindoor represents a critical moment not just for India, but for the global fight against terror. It calls upon nations to rise above strategic calculations and to recognize that every act of terrorism anywhere is a threat to peace everywhere. Standing with India now is not about choosing sides in a regional dispute. It is about choosing the side of humanity over hatred, of order over chaos, of justice over terror. Countries that remain silent, or who attempt to balance between the victim and the aggressor, embolden the very forces that seek to tear our world apart. The moral test of the international community is not how it responds to terror in its own backyard, but how it responds when another nation bleeds. If peace is a universal right, then defending it must be a universal responsibility. The people of India have shown remarkable strength and unity in the face of repeated attacks. What they ask for now is not charity, but solidarity, not sympathy, but support. To say, clearly and loudly, that terrorism, no matter its source, no matter its target, will be met with one voice, one stand, and one unwavering commitment, that it has no place in the civilized world. Justice is not about vengeance or retaliation. It is about restoring dignity, protecting life, and preserving the values that unite humanity. When a nation is attacked by terror, when innocent lives are lost in cold blood, the pain runs deep, but justice must rise not from rage, but from righteousness. It must reflect the strength of a people who believe not in revenge, but in rightful accountability. That is the essence of a just society, one that responds to wrongs not with hatred, but with moral clarity and lawful strength. Operation Sindoor is a reflection of that principle. It is not an act of revenge, but a measured and rightful response to repeated violations of peace. India, for years, has shown restraint in the face of provocation. It has chosen the path of diplomacy, hoping for reason to prevail. But the pursuit of peace does not mean surrendering the right to defend one's people. When terrorists cross borders, take innocent lives, and challenge a nation's dignity, justice demands action not out of anger, but out of duty. The families of the victims do not seek bloodshed, they seek answers. They seek acknowledgement. They seek a world where their loved ones are not forgotten, where their pain is not politicized or brushed aside. True justice honors their memory by ensuring that such tragedies are never repeated. It requires bold steps, responsible leadership, and the courage to act against those who believe they can kill without consequence. Justice is not complete when the attacker is punished. It is complete when the threat itself is dismantled and future generations are safe. India's actions through Operation Sindoor must be understood in this context. They are not guided by revenge, but by the responsibility to protect, to prevent, and to ensure that terror is not allowed to strike again. It is about saying clearly that Indian lives matter and that their safety is not negotiable. This is not a campaign of destruction. It is a mission to uphold the values of human life, national security, and regional stability. In doing so, India is setting an example that strength and justice can walk hand in hand. Justice must also extend beyond the battlefield. It must reach the corridors of international diplomacy. Nations that shelter or turn a blind eye to terror must be held accountable. The fight against terrorism cannot be won on the front lines alone. It must be fought in boardrooms, in alliances, and in institutions. Supporting justice means cutting off funding, removing platforms, and exposing the networks that allow terror to grow. Every government, every leader has a role to play, and if they choose to remain silent, they too must answer to the conscience of the world. India does not seek to escalate conflict. It seeks to end a cycle of violence that has claimed far too many lives. Justice in its purest form is not loud. It does not boast. It acts with purpose, with precision, and with principle. It lifts the burden of fear from the shoulders of the innocent, and puts the weight of consequence on the ones who dared to harm them. In that spirit India moves forward, not in hatred but in honor, not to destroy but to defend, and not to seek revenge but to ensure that the path of terror ends here, with justice leading the way. Peace is not simply the absence of conflict. It is the presence of justice, security, and mutual respect. It is built through understanding, maintained through cooperation, and defended through strength. But peace cannot be negotiated with those who reject its very meaning. When terror groups glorify violence, when they target innocent lives to send a message of fear, when they refuse dialogue and embrace destruction, then peace becomes impossible unless those threats are neutralized. You cannot reason with those who find purpose in bloodshed, who disguise hate as ideology, and who consider civilian lives as expendable tools for their agendas. Terrorism, by its nature, is a rejection of peace. It thrives on chaos, instability, and division. Its goal is not compromise, but submission. Its language is not diplomacy, but violence. When a nation is continuously subjected to such acts, it cannot be expected to respond with silence or inaction. Peace demands that threats to its existence be met with clarity and force, not to perpetuate war, but to preserve the right to live without fear. Operation Sindoor is not an act of aggression, but a necessary step to ensure that peace is not taken for granted, nor mistaken for weakness. India, for years, has extended the hand of peace, even in the face of repeated betrayal. It has pursued dialogue, agreements, and diplomacy, hoping for a future of coexistence. But time and again, that hope has been shattered by attacks on soldiers, civilians, and schoolchildren. At some point, peace must stop being a one-sided promise. A nation cannot continue to reach out with open hands while its people are being buried in silence. True peace must be mutual, and it must be protected when attacked. There are those who call for restraint, who advise patience even when terror strikes at the heart of a nation. But they must understand, peace does not mean surrender. It does not mean tolerating endless provocations or sacrificing national security in the name of diplomacy. It means creating a reality in which such attacks are no longer possible. It means dismantling the structures that allow terrorism to flourish, holding accountable those who provide shelter or support, and making it clear that the price of enabling violence is too high. India is not seeking endless conflict. It is seeking lasting peace. But that peace cannot be forged with words alone. It must be built on security, on justice, and on the elimination of threats that refuse to coexist peacefully. Operation Sindoor sends a message that India is ready to talk, but not under the shadow of a gun, that it values peace deeply, but it will not buy it at the cost of dignity or safety. Those who advocate for peace must also support the measures necessary to secure it. No nation should be asked to live under constant threat while waiting endlessly for its adversaries to reform. Peace is not a gift, it is a right, and when that right is denied, a nation has the duty to act. Not recklessly, not vengefully, but with firm purpose. India's actions are rooted in that very duty. It seeks to make peace possible again, not by pleading with those who reject it, but by removing the barriers that make it impossible. Because real peace, lasting, stable peace, cannot be made with those who glorify terror. It must be built by those who are willing to confront it, defeat it, and rise above it.